It is time to begin this morning. We are starting the adult auditorium class. For those of you who would like to have a seat, we welcome you to class, but if you could make your way out, if you're just having a conversation, appreciate it. Again, I would ask those who are not going to be in the class to go ahead and exit the class so we can start this morning. You can sit it up here. Go ahead, sit up here. And we'll get going. All right, for those of you who are visiting with us today, we welcome you to our congregation, and we hope that if you are looking for a church family, you have found it today. If I can get this in my pocket, we will be good to go. All right. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Daniel. Clay is not here today, so he asked me to fill in, and as I like to say, I'm the younger and less attractive version of Clay Brown. So we will have a good class this morning as we continue our study today through the book, the foundational book, David and Solomon. Last week we talked about David choosing Solomon. There's a change that's going on. Changes in the air as David is coming to the end of his life, and he is seeing that there needs to be a transition in the kingdom. And Solomon has been chosen for the next heir appointed. This will be the last king when Solomon takes over that is in what we would call the United Kingdom. There are three kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, who rule the entirety of Israel. And after Solomon, Jeroboam and Rehoboam come to power, and they split the kingdom, and they split the tribes into two parts. We have Israel that will come, and then Judah. Judah would be made up of the kingdoms of the kings. Benjamin, the smallest kingdom, and Judah, the largest kingdom, and also Levi, who never had a property, but is sprinkled throughout the territory with cities that they were provided. And so parts of Levi will be in there, and then the other tribes will be in the kingdom of Israel to the north. This week we're going to look again at the exit of David and the entrance of Solomon. So David has come to the end of his life. Literarily speaking, David is the everyman of the Bible. When we talk about in literary terms, an everyman is someone, as a protagonist, typically that the audience can identify with. David was a real man. He really did live in the olden times. There has been a lot of archaeological work recently in the news that has come out about the kingdom of David and the different archaeological finds that have been made of that time. And he's coming to the end of his life. But as we have said, he's the everyman. Nobody else other than Jesus David has the most scripture written about him except for Jesus. Let me just put it that way. There's more times that Jesus is mentioned in the Bible, and the second to that is David. So we know more about him than any other person in the Bible, and that allows us to identify with him, to identify with his life. And we've seen him grow up from a very young man now to an old man. And it's a little bit bittersweet. It's a little bit sad when we think about it. We've seen him go and grow. We've seen him stumble and fall. And all these things God has laid out transparently and just totally to us in complete honesty and truth, the life of David. And he's now charging Solomon with his final commands as king. He's instructing Solomon his last will and testament and giving him the final wisdom that a father can impart to a child, to a son, especially to one who will be ruling in his stead. And this is advice that will last a lifetime. If you look at the advice that David gives, the commands that he gives to Solomon, these are things not only that will serve an immediate purpose, but things that will last as a foundation for his reign as king to come. These things that David sets forth are set in truth, they're set in the will of God, and will lay a foundation that will serve Solomon as he rules as king. And this is a monumental shift in culture for the people. You know, I don't look forward anymore to the times that we have to deal with elections. Because first you get the junk mail. Stupid junk mail. And then you know it's coming, and then all the other junk mail comes, and then you start seeing the ads. I don't watch TV anymore. I watch recorded television or DVR or just Netflix or something. I stay away from live television. But if you happen to catch something on live television, like a sporting event, you see all the political ads. And you know a change is in the wind. And then finally it leads up to the day of the election, and then everything just tears loose. And finally, it's so happy at the day after the election, whether you liked who got put in office or not, you don't have to deal with the ads anymore for a while. At least you got a reprieve on that. That's kind of what's going on here. There's a monumental shift in culture. You have a king that's been reigned for a while, a king that was well-liked in battle, a king that was well-liked a lot of times in how he treated his people. He was a man among the people, and he danced with his people and rejoiced with his people. What's coming next? We don't know. But David is doing his best to provide a foundation for Solomon and to show him the way as he's going through. So we'll open up with 1 Kings chapter 2. Again, if you want to open your books or your Bibles and follow along as we read together, we would love to do that. We'll have it here on the screen as well. Starting in 1 Kings chapter 2, starting with the first 9 verses. Now the days of David drew near that he should die. He charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. And keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. That the Lord may fulfill his word, which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth, with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Moreover, you know also what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, and what he did to the 2 commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner the son of Ur, and to Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, put the blood of war on his belt, and that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore do according to your wisdom, and do not let the gray hair go down on the grave, his gray hair go down to the grave in peace, but show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let him be among those who eat at your table. For so they came to me when I fled from Absalom, your brother. And see, you have with you Shimei of Jura, a Benjamite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now therefore do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man, and know what you ought to do to him, but bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. David had a charge. He had a command that he wanted to give to Solomon. And if we look at the scriptures that we just read, we can kind of condense it down into 4 things. First of all, be strong. Second of all, prove yourself a man. Keep the charge of the Lord, and show punishment and kindness as wisdom dictates. And as we open up this morning in our class, we're going to look at these 4 things, the things that David charged Solomon with. We want to look at the immediate need that it had for Solomon and the immediate impact that it had for him, but also how can we take that into our lives and put it through in our lives and apply it today. First of all, be strong. It means be firm. Be confident. It's the exact same language that Joshua had, if you remember his call. Be strong and what? Courageous. Do not be afraid. So many times in scriptures we're told, be strong, be courageous. It's hard to do that sometimes. That's exactly what David is telling his son. Be firm, be confident. Speak with the voice of authority. That's so hard sometimes. Brandon had a wonderful lesson this morning that talked about how we downgrade our talents at times, and what a great way to introduce our lesson this morning. We don't want to be strong. We don't want to be courageous at times because that tends to put a target on our head. You know, I love listening to my oldest son because he speaks with the voice of authority all the time. Daddy, did you know that this is so-and-so is the biggest shark in the world, and it can eat so much meat per day? I didn't know that. That's really great. Daddy, did you know that this is the most poisonous snake in the world, and if it bites you, you will die in 15 seconds? I didn't know that. That's really great. He is strong and courageous with the knowledge that he has, and he loves to share that knowledge. And I wish that we could recapture that knowledge and that strength and the courage that little ones have as they share knowledge with us, the things that they've learned, and they're so confident in what they know. There's a school of thought that if you spend 10,000 hours in your life on something, then you're better than 90% of the people in the world. If you spend 20 minutes a day, every day doing something, you're better than 95% of the people in the world on that. I want to tell you right now, if you read your scriptures 20 minutes a day, every day, you can be strong and courageous in the knowledge that you have in the Bible. And you can share that with others. So let's be strong and confident as we go through in what we need to do. Why does he need to be confident? Because he needs to prepare for the blow that this will strike. Everybody knows what's coming. David says it, I'm going the way of my fathers. I'm going the way of all the world. And sometimes when others die, the loved ones that we have, if we know that they're dying, if they're in the hospital, we just know they're getting older, we try to prepare ourselves. But there's going to be a blow that happens. There's going to be a storm that comes. And David says, not only do you need to prepare yourself for what's coming in the leadership capacity that you have, you need to know that I'm leaving you, and that's going to be an emotional blow. We know that emotions don't always go well with good decisions. If we're in a bad state emotionally, we don't make good decisions. We can be weak, we can be discouraged, and we can make bad choices. And David is admonishing Solomon, be strong. Something is coming, a storm is coming in your life, and you need to be able to weather that. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be sad. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be upset, but it means that you need to be prepared and understand this is coming. Because it's the way of all things. It's inevitable. Death and taxes, right? We know they're both coming. We don't like it, but it's coming. So we need to prepare ourselves. Don't get caught up in the inevitabilities of life. David had learned this lesson a long time ago. There was a time in David's life when he was a young newlywed. He was a wonderful warrior. People would call out and they would worship, or not worship, but they would proclaim that Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. And David was having a wonderful time in his life, and he had a wife, Michal. He had a mentor, Samuel. He had a friend, Jonathan. He had a job. And in a very short amount of time, those four things were taken away from him. He lost his job. Saul tried to kill him and kicked him out. He lost his first wife, his true love that he had at that time, Michal. Samuel died. Jonathan was taken away from him. That friendship was separated from him. He lost things. He was able to weather the storms of life because these things are transient. God gives and God takes away, but blessed is the name of the Lord. David was trying to prepare Solomon to be strong and not to get caught up in the inevitabilities of life, but to have the long-term picture that God is with us all the way and realize that it's time for me to go and let me go. It's always so hard to let a loved one go, and it's always such a terrible thing. And I remember years ago when I lost my grandfather. It was, I can say this now that all my grandparents are dead. He was my favorite grandparent. He was so wonderful, and he taught me to be the man that I am today in so many things. And his death was unexpected, and he was so ripped from us at a time that I wasn't ready to let him go. And I remember whenever I would drive in Illinois at the place where he is buried, I always have a pull to go to see his grave. But then I show up and I look and I go, well, I guess I'm done. I don't know what else to do. He's not really here. He's alive and he's someplace else at the moment. And I had to come to terms emotionally to let him go and not to live in the past, but to live knowing that I have a place to go see him again and to be with him. So let's remember as we face the storms of life and as we especially face a time of death, not that it's going to be easy, not that it's going to be absolutely tragic and horrible. This is the way of life, and we can't get caught up in the inevitabilities of what happens. And when it's time for someone to go, we need to let them go and to look forward to being with them again. The second thing David instructs to his son is to prove yourself a man. That wording in there, the language is kind of loose, but it means let it come to pass, become, make a transition. Not that he's necessarily saying that Solomon is not a man there, but there is a path of transition, especially for young men, to become a man. Make sure, Solomon, that you make that path, that you are actively becoming a man. Make that transition. Don't stay where you're at. And that word man there is looking at what it looks like as being valiant. Be courageous enough to embrace manhood. That's a scary proposition sometimes. Position does not make a man makes his position. Prove yourself to be a man. I want to say too, being male doesn't mean you're a man. We have a lot of confusion today where people don't even know what a man is. Is there such thing as men and women? We just can't tell. It's one of the unsolvable mysteries of the universe, people want to say. We just can't tell. It's a spectrum. Right? Well, that's not true, first of all. But just because you're a male doesn't mean you're a man. There's a lot of men that are males out there that have not embraced manhood, what it means to be a man. And I want to say that we have a severe lack of men today. We have browbeaten our boys in our society to tell them they're worthless and they're no good. You don't need to be a father. You don't need to be a man that grows up. And we are severely lacking in men today. We need men to lead families. We need men to lead congregations and communities. It's all tied together in the Bible. If you look at Titus, the one thing that would cure a community of being just a bunch of degenerates is elders in the congregations. You have a community that needs to be pulled together. You get elders in the communities, in the churches, and you get those elders involved in their communities, and you look what's going to happen. It's all tied together. We need men to lead in our families and our congregations and our communities. It is so important. And we need men involved. 15 years ago, I've been here for 15 years. I cannot believe that. I still feel like the new guy whenever I come in. I can't believe it's been 15 years that I've been here. Before I moved here, I worshiped at a congregation where I lived in Bloomington, Indiana. I lived there for exactly 3 years. I started my job on April 11th of 2005, and I ended my job April 11th of 2008. And I'm a nerd, and I love that. That was just like, perfect. That was great. Exactly 3 years. And in the 3 years that I lived there, I worshiped with the Highland Village congregation, a wonderful little congregation there. And there was 4 teenage children in the teenage class, and they needed a teacher. And so I volunteered. I can go there. I can't come Wednesday nights because I work second shift, and I won't be available because I'll be at work. But Sunday mornings, I can be there Sunday morning, Sunday night. I will teach Sunday mornings. And for 18 months, half of the time that I lived in that congregation and worshiped at that congregation, I taught that class. And I finally said, I need a break. I would like to be fed as well. For the next 2 quarters, they didn't have a teacher. Of the 4 children, there were 4 fathers that could have stepped up. And it frustrated me to no end that I was a 25-year-old man teaching their children, and they couldn't step up and be involved. Now, I understand that every man can be a teacher. However, every man is involved to teach their own children. And that frustrated me to no end, that those men didn't feel the need or didn't feel the empowered, or didn't even come to me. Can you show me how to help me be involved? Can you show me how to teach my child? For whatever reason, those children went without a teacher because I needed a break, and I just needed to be fed myself. Men, I'm just going to ask you, I'm not pointing anybody out, I'm just asking, are you involved as you can be? Are you involved in the lives of your family, and the lives of your community, and the lives of the congregation that you serve here? Are you involved as you can be? Maybe you are. Maybe you do more than you can. Maybe you could do more. I don't know. But I want to challenge us as men to be involved, to do what we can. Use those talents, just like Brandon said. Just because you have one talent doesn't mean it's a worthless talent. It means you have a talent that is needed for the power of God. And he needs you to use that talent. And if you have 5, that's wonderful, or 2, or whatever the case may be. Use the talents. Let's use the talents that God has given us. Look at the difference then here between the world's ideal man and the ideal man of David. The ideal man in the world today avoids work. Men that I grew up, men that are men now, or maybe say males because they're not actually acting as men. There was an individual that I grew up with that was in my local congregation at home. His name was Ryan. Ryan didn't make really good choices. I don't believe he finished high school. I think he dropped out of high school. Ended up getting a woman pregnant, didn't marry her, just lived with her, had a few kids. And every summer, Ryan will get a job and work landscaping. And that's it. And for the rest of the year, he lives on his girlfriend because he wants to avoid work. And that's the ideal man today. They want to avoid work. They fight those around them. Men are known maybe as brawlers, or those who are rough and tumble, and they want to fight everybody about them. And maybe they're not, good men that love each other. They have a very carnal focus. The one thing that worries me today about my 2 boys more than anything else is the problem of pornography that we have in this society. It is absolutely horrendous. The problem of pornography and how it changes the brain chemistry in young men, and it makes them physically unable to have relationships with women as they grow up. It scares me to death. I don't worry about drugs. I don't worry about financial problems. My wife worries a lot about a lot of other stuff with our children, and I worry for our boys the most about the problem of pornography that we have in this world and the carnal focus that we have with our men. They limit their emotion. I don't like, and probably a lot of other men can empathize with this. I don't like to cry in front of my wife. I don't like to cry in front of my children. I don't like to show emotion a lot. And that's an ideal that the world likes. And he seeks his own pleasure and his own path. I'm going to do it my way. I hate that song that's Frank Sinatra saying. I know it's very popular. I did it my way. I did it my way. That's exactly the wrong attitude that we should have. What did David do? What's the ideal man that he's encouraging Solomon to have? Commit to the mundane work. Where was David the first time we see him in Scripture? Does anybody know? Call it out. What was he doing? Watching the sheep. And he's called to serve Saul and to play the harp and to calm him down. And when his brothers are out at battle and they're fighting the giant, well, not fighting the giant, but ignoring the giant, where's David at again? He's tending the sheep. He committed himself to the daily mundane work that's not flashy, but it's important because it's the mundane work that gets us ready for the hard and heavy lifting when life throws us a curveball. Christian men, godly men, commit themselves to the mundane work of the unsung heroes. David's ideal man fights the giants and the beasts and then goes to battle for God, for his family. He's the one that stands in the way of danger and protects those around him. Instead of fighting others around him, he fights the giants and the beasts and the monsters of this world for the righteousness of God. He faces his sin and repents it. Instead of seeking the carnal things of God, when he makes a mistake, he owns up to it. He faces his sin. We talked about this so many weeks ago about the loss of the son that he and Bathsheba had when he sinned with Bathsheba and killed Uriah the Hittite. David wasn't a perfect man, but he was a man after God's own heart. He was a man that sought repentance and faced his sin. And he was a man who showed emotion. David wept a number of times in the scriptures. He showed anxiety. Go through the Psalms. God, I don't know what's going on. People are hunting me. I don't know why they're hunting me. I didn't do anything wrong to him. But you're my rock, you're my salvation. He showed joy. He wasn't afraid to show his emotions. He wasn't afraid to hide that from others, but he showed emotions and was empathetic. This is the kind of man that he wants Solomon to be, and again, to seek God in all things. So how do we become a man? How do we become that man? Well, first of all, we make the choice to become a man. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it's an ideal. I'm going to decide to do this. 1 Corinthians 13, Paul says, when I became a man, I put away childish things. When I was a child, they acted like a child. But when I became a man, what did I do? I put away the childish things. What a hard thing that is for so many in our society. Peter Pan, it's the paradox that people get into, especially a lot of men. They want to be the child that never grows up. Look, I like to play video games. Okay, I like to watch animated things. I like cartoons. It's a format of visualization I like. There's things you can do in animation that you can't do in other formats. It's a wonderful thing. But I'm not a child. When I got married, I decided I should not play as many video games as I did because I wanted to look cool in front of my wife. You know, I want her to think I'm cool and attractive, not like a nerd that just plays video games all the time. I don't sit there and play video games for hours and hours and hours on end when my family needs me. You can say the same thing for sports. I know football is a big thing around here. I like baseball. Okay, I know, forgive me. But I can't sit down and watch a baseball game for 3 hours and ignore my family. Maybe there's a time of negotiation. I could have my wife, I want to watch this game, and you can do it with the kids, and I can have some special time to myself. That's fine. I'm not saying anything against that. Men need their time as well, but we can't be the kid that never grows up. What an ugly story it is. I mean, it's a fun fairy tale, but if you think of Peter Pan, he's not a great guy. You know, he doesn't want to be a man. Well, can you blame him? He looks at Captain Hook. Well, if I become a man, well, first of all, I've got a hook, and that's not really cool. I'm being chased by chaos and by the clock, by life, because as I get older and as I get older and lose myself physically to life, the clock is chasing me wherever I go. I don't want to be that, right? I can't have an interesting relationship with a woman because, you know, I just want to be a boy all the time and not actually grow up and give a partner something that she needs. It's kind of a sad story. But we have so many men today caught in the life of Peter Pan, and they need to grow out of that. Dr. Jordan Peterson says it this way: there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the meaning of their life to sustain them through difficult times. They are left bitter, resentful, without purpose, adrift, hostile, revengeful, arrogant, deceitful, if of no use to themselves or anyone, and no partner for a woman. There is nothing good about it. We need to make a choice to be a man, and we need to encourage our young men to make that choice. We need to flee evil and pursue righteousness. Read through 1 Timothy 6. Paul talks about what the man of God does. Put away that evil stuff and pursue righteousness. Grow thoughtfully. This is Luke 2:52 is a mirror of how Samuel grew up. This is the way that Jesus grew up. It said Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Thoughtfully growing in our lives. We have a plan of action of how we grow. Prove yourself a man. Not only does he need to be strong and prove himself a man, but he needs to keep the charge of God. This is an echo of the words of Moses found in Deuteronomy 17, where Moses talks about how if you teach your children to do the righteous things, then you'll keep the land and you'll be able to live in the land there, and you'll be people of God. Base your actions on God's directions. Just what Brandon was saying, keep God in all your decisions. I like to say, put the God lens on. How does that impact my life? Well, what would God think about what I'm doing about that? Keep to his directions. Trust in his promises. Try to stay on his time. You know, Jonah it's a great example of the times that we would run away from God or run to God, run beyond what God wants us to do, or run one with God, right? Stay on his time. We try to think, well, I'd like this to happen in my life, but God's just being slow. He's late in fulfilling this promise to me, or what I think should be a promise to me. And I'm going to say God's always on time with whatever he needs. We might not understand it at the time. We might want something now. But we have to understand that God has a longer timeline that we do, and he'll give us the blessings when we need them, and we can handle them. And finally, the last thing that David charged Solomon with was to show mercy in punishment, and to show wisdom in his punishment and his mercy. There's matters of state that need immediate attention. David is dying, and look, Solomon, there's things that you're going to need to address right now. When I die, it needs to be addressed now, because if you let it fester, it's going to be a problem. What happened when Joshua took over with the children of Israel and they left the people of Canaan stay around? That problem festered. He said, you got to address it now like a battlefield general. He said, you need to remove Joab, remove the threats to the throne. Barzillai, he was good, so repay the kindness that he showed me. And Shimei, dispense justice. So we said, though, these are good foundational lessons for Solomon. These are good examples of a one-off, but as a case study, you can show, do this now, but then remember this later on. Remove the threats to the throne, repay kindness as shown to you, and dispense justice as you need to. The next couple of verses, we have a very short transition. So David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. And Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. So we just have a short transition. David dies and is buried in Jerusalem. He's reigned 40 years. So if you remember, when he started first, he was anointed king a number of times at Hebron with the tribe of Judah, which was his tribe. Then later on, fully for the 33 years when he was enthroned with the rest of the people, the rest of the kingdoms as they came together under him. And Solomon took the throne in a seamless, bloodless inheritance of power. This is the only time that this is ever going to happen for the people of Israel. Again, 3 kings through the United Kingdom, and then after this, Jeroboam and Rehoboam fight for the throne. They split the kingdom. Never again will there be this nice transition of power. This is the ideal of what God would have his people see. Lastly, as we finish this morning, we have a request from Adonijah, who is one of Solomon's brothers. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. So she said, "You come peaceably." And he said, "Peaceably." Moreover, he said, "I have something to say to you." And she said, "Say it." Then he said, "You know that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over, and that has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now I ask one petition of you, do not deny me." And she said to him, "Say it." Then he said, "Please speak to King Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife." So Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to you to the king." Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her and sat on his throne and had a throne set for the king's mother. So she sat at his right hand. Then she said, "I desire one small petition of you, do not refuse me." And the king said to her, "Ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you." She said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother, as wife." And King Solomon answered and said to his mother, "Now why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for that he is my older brother. For him and for Abiathar the priest, or for Joab the son of Jeriah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "May God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah had not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and sat on the throne of David my father, who has established a house for me, as is promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. So we have a request from Adonijah. If you remember from the last chapter, Adonijah had gone to the altar and held the horns of the altar there. That usually meant that you were asking for mercy, that no one could come and just grab you and kill you. You're asking for mercy. Typically, this was for those who had committed a crime of murder or who accidentally killed someone. They would go and they would hold the horns and then be able to be granted passage to a city of refuge that they could go and abide in. Adonijah goes to Bathsheba and asks for Abishag in marriage. And then Bathsheba goes to Solomon to ask for this favor. And Solomon is enraged because he sees exactly what it is. It's an attempt for the throne. You know, it's interesting, too, if you look at what Adonijah has said, it was mine. This was mine. But it was given to Solomon because of what God wanted. What totally backward thinking. This is a man that wants to lead the people of God, and his thinking is completely backwards. Not, let me serve my brother because, unfortunately, I wasn't given what I wanted, the bauble that I wanted, but I'm going to serve the man that God picked out. Instead, it's mine. That's what I should have had, but God gave it to them. How many times do we have that kind of sorry attitude in our life? I wanted it. It's not fair. They got it. God gave it to them. It should have been mine. Hopefully, let's not have that attitude in our life. So he sends out Benaiah to execute Adonijah. We have some further activities just to finish out the chapter. Abiathar is exiled, so Solomon sends Abiathar to Anathoth, which is a city of refuge 3 miles north of Jerusalem. He spares his life because, one, he carried the ark before David, and he empathized with David when David was afflicted. It's kind of an interesting story. David said, when I got sad and I got all afflicted, he came to me, and he was afflicted too. He felt what I felt. He was empathetic with me, and that meant a lot. So Abiathar is exiled, and Abiathar stays in exile as far as we know, and nothing else is shown. Joab is executed. Joab hears of the political winds, the changes that's going on. He knows he's in danger, so he goes and he grabs the horns of the altar. We've got a lot of horn grabbing in these chapters as we have the transition. A lot of people are going to grab those horns. And Benaiah goes and he kills him. He wants to kill him, but he restrains. Solomon instructs him to strike down Joab later. Solomon makes the argument that Joab had already sealed his death warrant. There's no mercy left for him. His sins had finally caught up with him, and there's no remedy. It's kind of the same situation if you remember back to Ahab and Jezebel. God has said there's no remedy left for these people. They are so far gone. There's nothing that's going to bring them back to me. There's no remedy for them. And that's the same idea here in the language for Joab. He was once the right hand of David. He was a man, serving the Lord, but he has gone so far. There's no remedy for him. And so Benaiah executes Joab and he buries him nearby. Shimei, his exile and execution. So if you remember Shimei, he was kicking rocks and cursing David as David was leaving when Absalom had taken over. Solomon tells Shimei to build a house and stay put. He puts him in exile. So Solomon, he's actually a very kind individual. He's appropriate in his punishment and his wisdom. He says, build a house, stay put. You can stay on your property. When you leave your property, you're dead. Shimei agrees and does exactly what Solomon says. 3 years later, there's some slaves that run off to Gath. And so Shimei decides to run after him. It's found out about. Solomon has him executed by Benaiah. And that's the end of Shimei. He makes some appointments. Benaiah takes Joab's place to lead the army, and Zadok takes Adonijah's place as the priest. And that rounds us out to the end of the chapter. So what does it matter? This is the ideal example of power transition, never again to be realized for the kingdom. Again, I've said this multiple times. Never again will the people of God see this peaceful type of transition. One of my favorite things to do when I was younger was to go through and just read all the assassinations of all the kings of Israel. And there was one guy that lasted 7 days. I think his name was Zermi or something like that. And it just cracked me up. I mean, it's like he got to be king, but he was only king for a week. And then somebody else came and executed him, and then somebody else took over, right? It would be an absolute bloodbath And the kings of Israel were terrible, absolutely terrible. And if you go back and read through the first and second Kings, it'll say this king came to power and he was worse than anybody that came before him. And then the next guy, this guy came to power and he was worse than anybody that came before him. And it was just terrible, 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 terrible. Kings of Judah, not much better, a little bit better, not much better. But the people will never see this peaceful transition ever again. And what a terrible loss that was for them. Solomon was enthroned and in power and stability. So this peaceful transition came over, and people understood the power that Solomon had. And he was able to reign in a way that nobody else could. And he was able to do projects and to build and to be the awe of the world, really. We remember the Queen of Sheba came and visited him. And what a wonderful thing it was that the people of God could be a part of that. I don't know if you're aware that, maybe you are in your studies, that little strip of land that the people of God inhabited, especially in Jerusalem, was the only path for commerce in the entire world at that time. So if you wanted to go, say to Egypt, or you wanted to go into Asia or wherever, you had to cross that little strip of land that they owned. God gave them the reign of the world economy at that time. So people would have known about Solomon. People would have known about the way he was king and the wisdom that he had. God was able to impact the entire world through David and through Solomon and through Saul, just by that little strip of land. What a wonderful thing it was that they had that at that time, and then they kind of lost it, right? They lost the plot, so to speak, by the instability. And then the whole world knew that those people that followed Jehovah God couldn't get it together. But at that time, they controlled the entire economy of the world. He established his rule and authority and was firmly ensconced as king. People, multiple times after the transition here, it's King Solomon, King Solomon, King Solomon. It's not just Solomon, it's King Solomon, to understand that he was firmly ensconced as king and there was nothing else going on. So all things considered as we close, one thing again, as we remember David's charge to Solomon, we must prepare for transition. Transition is going to come. You know, I love the passage that, I can't remember if it's Peter, one of the first Peter passages. Don't be surprised when things come your way. Bad things happen to you. Don't be surprised. Prepare yourself. It's going to be tough. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be just terrible. One of the things, as my parents get older, and I'm not trying to be morbid or, drag us down here. As my parents get older and all my grandparents are dead and my wife's grandparents are dead and, our parents have kind of moved up to the top rung, right? And we're kind of the next rung, and the kids below us, and got to prepare myself. And I think about the times that my grandfather died, and it's not so much the time that he died that I hated, which I did hate. It was the 3 or 4 months later when I knew he was dead, but I would have dreams of him, conversations with him, and I would wake up and my heart would be ripped out again because he wasn't there. And I know that's going to happen with my parents, and I hate that. I hate that that's going to happen, but I have to prepare myself for the transition that's coming, because it's going to be tough, and I have to stand firm, and I can't lose my faith, or what will it do to my children? Right? I have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I have to prepare myself for that. Second of all, we need to remember men are important. They're so important. Our society is so down on men right now, and the importance of what men brings to our life. Again, we're not talking about the worldly man that's carnal and angry and can never get along with anybody and hard drinking, hard smoking, hard drug. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the men of God that we need to lead our communities, that we need to lead our families and our congregations. They're so important. We are now raising the future of the church. And what does that mean to us? When I look at my children and when I look at my sons, what does it mean for them to lead? What lessons am I imparting to them that they can lead? For my daughter, what lessons am I imparting to her that she can teach her family to love each other and to teach good things as she goes forward? And lastly, we should listen to the older generations and seek their wisdom to establish ourselves. Seek the old paths, like Jeremiah says. Seek the old paths. They're there. They're established. We don't have to be a pioneer. Just seek the old paths, right? Because it's so much wisdom and so much things that they had to teach us. Next week, we'll have a look at Solomon's wisdom. And would you bow with me as we pray and we close out today? Father, we're so very grateful for the time that we have to meet together and to break open the bread of life that you have for us. We know that it is dynamic and living in every way today, and just as powerful as it was when it was first penned so many years ago. Father, we thank you so much for the life of David, that we can look at him and to identify with him and understand that even though we sin, there is grace and mercy for us if we come to you with a penitent heart to ask for forgiveness, that we can live righteously with you. We thank you for Solomon and the way that he took these words to heart and started off his kingdom. And we too ask that we could do that in our life as we look to the scriptures, that we can put it in our lives and enact it in every way. And all this we pray in your son's name. Amen.